Bismillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. Just to resume, hopefully there is sound this time. Inshallah, I've just made sure that the sound should be relayed onto our stream as well. So we're speaking about things which are disliked, makruhat in salah, and we've just briefly explained what a makruh is and what it means. First and foremost is to leave out any wajib thing in salah, and a wajib thing is like reciting Fatiha, or the first tashahhud, or the qunut in witr, like Allahumma nasta'inuka and so on. Or the leaving out a wajib would be makruh, and therefore blameworthy and sinful. And this first, number one, is actually a defining guideline for the remaining things which are makruh, because when something is makruh, it means that you're either leaving out a wajib or you're leaving out something that's very important, sunnah of the salah itself. Number two, to fiddle around abath with one's garment or body without excessive movement, as excessive movement will invalidate the salah. We spoke about amal kathir last lesson. Amal kathir, excessive movement. If you do too much excessive movement, then it can actually destroy your salah. And we're not talking about that level. What do someone just keeps on touching their, their clothes, touching their pen, touching their phone, touching their beard, touching their nose. If you're wearing a hat, touching their glasses, touching their shimagh, touching their whatever they're wearing. If you keep on touching and fiddling around like that, this is called abath, and this, even though would not reach to the level of amal kathir and maybe not destroy the salah, it will be makruh, disliked. Because why is that? Because Allah says in the Quran, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. Those who have khushu' and calmness and stillness in salah. The Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ, and Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, they would pray in stillness and calmness, and not fiddle around, not move around, not fidget. So doing too much fidgeting may actually break your salah, but doing a small amount would be abath and would be disliked. And so we should try to be as still, as composed in our salah as possible. Number three, to wipe away pebbles on the ground except for once for prostration. Someone for some reason goes into fiddling, for some reason they're just wiping away pebbles. If you want to do one wipe away because of sujood, because something will harm your face when you go to sajda or your knees, that's something else, but not to constantly with your toes, whatever. Number four, to crack one's knuckles, common practice. Allahu Akbar. This is not allowed. This is makruh. This would be blameworthy and could be sinful in your salah. 263. This is deemed prohibitively disliked. Meaning prohibitively disliked means makruh tahriman in the prayer. To do so outside the prayer without any need is deemed mildly disliked. Even cracking your knuckles and etc. you shouldn't do. It's actually mildly disliked even outside salah. But in salah is prohibitively and seriously disliked. Number five, to place one's hands on one's hips. I don't know why someone would do such a thing. Allahu Akbar. I can't imagine that. But if, say for example, someone is jahil, someone is ignorant, they didn't know what to do, and they did so, then there is a clear nahi and a command from the Prophet ﷺ to not do such a thing, to pray with your hands on your hips during salah. 267 says this is deemed prohibitively disliked for men. However, it is not disliked if there is a valid excuse. Someone has a valid excuse for some reason, maybe extreme pain or maybe bleeding, maybe holding in a bandage or something like that. What is an actual excuse? Then we know the Sharia is very lenient. Okay, to turn one's neck. Some people do that in salah. Have you seen? They're looking around. I don't know what they're doing. Why are they looking around in salah? This is not allowed. 265, it says, to turn one's neck. 265. That is while the torso remains facing the direction of the qibla. Because the body is facing the qibla, torso is the body. If they turn the whole body away from the qibla, the whole salah is gone. But if it's just their head and not their whole body, then this is makruh. Okay? Why is turning your body away? We've explained last lesson, because from the conditions of the salah is that you're facing towards the qibla. And if your body is turned away from the qibla, then you haven't faced the qibla, so therefore you haven't fulfilled one of the conditions of salah, and so your salah is broken. But turning your neck, you have no reason, no justification to turn your neck. Of course, if there is an actual reason, maybe you're scared of some sort of insect or a snake, or something of harm, or you're looking to keep an eye on your child, that kind of stuff, where there is an actual reason, would be understood. But for to read Quran is makruh tahriman, and would be disliked. Okay, to sit with one's knees up, 266. That is to place the buttocks on the ground and to elevate the knees, keeping them close to the chest, with one's hand on the ground in front of him, the way a dog sits. This is deemed prohibitively disliked. So basically, how some people sit outside Salah like this. I don't think anyone would ever. I haven't seen anyone that would sit like that in Salah, and you shouldn't. You would be makruh tahriman, very very disliked, and so you'd be sinful, and it would damage your Salah. To lay one's forearms on the ground during prostration. So 267 explains that this is deemed prohibited due to dislike for men, and then it has another explanation which we'll come to later, which is that your forearms, your arms, and your forearms, this part, you're not supposed to put it on the ground. You're supposed to lift it raised and detach it from the ground when you're praying. If you put it on the ground, then it is makruh. It is makruh. You should not do that because you're breaking a very important sunnah and a command of the Prophet ﷺ to raise your elbows and your forearms away from the ground when you are in sujood. Only your sujood is on 7 bones, right? The 2 toes or the toes, the hands, the knees, and the forehead, and the nose. But the nose is not the bone. So the nose as well, which is the 8th part. That should all be placed in the ground, but not your forearms or your elbows at all. To roll up one's sleeves, 268, during Salah. So he says the author himself stipulates the rolling up of the sleeves up to the elbows, suggesting that to do so without exposing the forearms is not disliked. Ibn Abidin, however, considers rolling the sleeves to any extent disliked. He also maintains that the person in the prayer should roll them back down with light movements. This discussion, of course, pertains to men alone. So since for women to be rolling up her sleeve during a Salah would be breaking a Salah because you're exposing her aura, which would invalidate the prayer and be sinful. So there's a discussion, am I allowed to pray like this? Am I allowed to pray like this? They're discussing whether it's makruh or not. It is makruh by agreement of the Hanafi school that it is disliked for you to pray, roll up your sleeves and show your elbows. But there's a further discussion as to even if it's allowed for you to roll up halfway through your elbows. So in summary, when you do pray, try your best to make sure your elbows are not uncovered. And I know there's a comment, the kandura, the Moroccan thobes are very popular now. I wear them as well, but I try my best to make sure that the elbows are covered. You can get ones that are slightly larger and longer because keeping your elbows covered. Now we're talking about makruh here, we're not talking about haram. Because you might say, well, what's he talking about? We're not talking about haram, because haram is when you're exposing your actual awra itself. But that's not your awra. For men, this is not awra. This is from the sunan to cover your body completely. خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ مَسْجِدٍ and so on. So, not to uncover your elbows during salah, keep them covered. For men to pray in only a lower garment that covers the nakedness while having the ability to cover the whole body. We said this last lesson. Someone says, okay, today I'm going to be a literalist. I'm only going to cover my awra as a man, which is from my navel to just beneath my knees. Well, it's awra. I'm just going to cover my awra. Yeah, I'm going to show that I know the awra, so I'm going to show it. But you have the ability to cover more. You have a jacket, you have a t-shirt, you have a thobe, you have this, you have that. But you just want to be a rebel. You just want to prove a point. In such a situation where you are just doing it while having the ability to cover yourself more, then this would be makruh. Because why is that? Because the Prophet ﷺ regularly would cover his entire body during salah. Though the awra is less than that, in salah he would cover his whole body. And so breaking that would be breaking a consistent sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And so therefore, the opposite of that would be a makruh, a disliked act, because the Prophet liked it. So for you not to do it is disliked. For men to pray only in a lower garment, this would be makruh for men, of course. For women, it's completely haram and it will be destroy the salah. To gather one's garment close to the body before going into prostration, 270, this is deemed prohibited, disliked, as it is a sign of arrogance. And that is perhaps not so much so in this particular culture, but nonetheless, if someone has, like, for example, bisht, wear a bisht or a big outer garment, and whenever you go into ruku', you're like drag it together. And as a sign of arrogance, you're rolling your clothes close to your body to show off with that intention, then this should be makruh for you. This should be disliked. You cannot do that. But also, what that also means is that your clothes shouldn't be too long and they should not be dragging. They should not be dragging them. They should be above your ankles, to gather one's garment close to the body before going into proceed. Do you see how there are so many rules and regulations? There is a common, khalas, I will not go into this common discussion, but there is a common discussion that, for example, the Hanafi school of law is very easy, while other schools of law, very easy, while other schools of law are very difficult. This is not always true. Sometimes the Hanafi school of law is very strict when it comes to certain tahara issues and salah issues and so on and so forth. Yes, very, very strict sometimes. So this is from min babil, this shows the precaution in salah. You shouldn't be fidgeting and gathering your garment. You should be focused on what you're doing, going Allahu Akbar, going to ruku and sujood. That's what you should be focused on. To place a shawl on one's head or shoulders, letting its ends hang down below. 271 says, this includes wearing any garment in any manner not customarily worn, such as a coat. Are you wearing it, just including a scarf around one's neck that hangs below? Hence, one should take it off. So anything that's going to distract you while you're standing in salah, going to ruku', you should take it off before you start your prayer. Because if you have a shawl on your shoulder, a scarf on your shoulder, and then you're going to ruku', you're worried about if it's going to fall or not. You're fidgeting again. So that's causing more movement. To close one's eyes during salah is makruh. However, if it helps you to focus in salah, then it's not makruh. Rather, it is liked, not disliked. To close your eyes generally, out of habit, is disliked. But if it's going to help you to focus in your salah, remember Allah more, consider the fact that you're standing in front of Allah, then in that case, this is not disliked, rather it is good. And I get this question all the time because sometimes in certain recordings people will find me when I'm reciting. That happened in one of the recordings, like in one of the salahs, and this wise guy closing. When I was doing the tarawih as well, in the Corona times, my camera was in front. Wise guy closing is, it's allowed. That's why it's allowed. If it helps you to focus, then especially with tarawih, man, you got to be extra focused. Otherwise you might make a mistake. To yawn excessively, to yawn without covering your mouth is also disliked. 273 says, if the yawn is natural and not deliberate, then there is no harm in it. Yet one should still try to prevent it with his lips. If you're about to yawn, you can stiffen your lip and try to avoid it, even if it's natural. If necessary, his hands. If it is deliberate, someone's intentionally yawning. And this happens, I don't know why, some people in salah, their yawn begins. Like you're trying to mashallah, recite nicely. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Oh. Okay, sorry sir, you're getting tired already. But yawning or even coughing excessively, we spoke about this last time. Yawning and etc., right, is if it's deliberate, God forbid if it's actually trying to distract the imam, then that would be a bigger problem. But if it's intentional, then you should be makruh, and you must try and avoid it. To stretch one's arms, exposing the chest. You want to expose the chest. 274 says, as long as there is no excessive movement, stretching is mild disliked, as it is done out of. So stretching, if you need to stretch your body like that sometimes and etc., then that's something that's mildly disliked. But of course, if someone intentionally exposes their body and so on, which is against sunnah, then this could be makruh. Then he says that to cover one's nose and mouth, except for when yawning. You shouldn't be praying with your mouth and nose covered unless it's corona and you have a valid excuse, or if you're yawning, you need to cover. But generally speaking, without any valid excuse, you should not be covering your nose and mouth, because that's not from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. He never covered his mouth and nose during salah. Allahu Alam, maybe there are exceptional scenarios, I don't know of, but he didn't cover his mouth and nose in salah, and so therefore it is against the sunnah, unless of course where you have a valid excuse like a medical and etc., preventative measures that we all know and seen recently. To prostrate with one's forehead covered, 276 explains that this is deemed mildly disliked unless one has an excuse, such as if the ground is very hot, cold of course. So it's mildly disliked, makruh tanzihan. So the question is, well, mate, your forehead is covered, as in me, so what's the situation? What I do, alhamdulillah, is I try to pull my hat a little bit back, especially during sujood. Why do I wear it a bit like that when I'm in outside of Salah, I don't know, I just think it looks nice like that. Another thing is my head, subhanAllah, I got a bit of a stretched head. Now some people have a very nice round head, and you know, you can put the hat back all the time, it doesn't look funny, but me, I got a bit of a stretched head. And so when I put it back like that, you can see it looks a bit, Jazakallah, you guys are too kind, but I feel as though it looks a bit funny. So I try to make it match and keep it round like that. But again, in Salah, in sujood, you should try your best to make sure your forehead is uncovered during sujood. It's on the ground itself, or the carpet that you're praying upon. We're not going to be so rigid like some other people. They have to bring some soil with them and some brick with them to pray on that brick. We're not that level of extreme, and this is not from the Sunnah. We are Sunni. Therefore, to prostrate with your forehead covered is disliked. So you should try to expose your forehead when you go to sujood. Allah give us tawfiq. To prostrate on a picture of an animate creature, 277 explains that is at the place of prostration where the face touches the ground, as that entails veneration for the picture and resembles worshipping it. This results in the most severe level of reprehensibility and karaha. It is not disliked, however, to pray with it underneath one's feet or where one sits due to the implicit disdain therein. Meaning, if there's some you can't put someone, there can't be on your prayer mat some sort of a picture of something, of an animal or someone, because it looks like you're prostrating on that person's picture, and that is completely, of course, this is similar to shirk, and so completely forbidden. And so therefore, do not prostrate on the picture. I don't know why someone would do that. You mustn't, you should never do that. To pray in a road, lavatory or graveyard, 278 explains, praying on the road disturbs traffic. The lavatory is a place of filth and the devils, and praying in the graveyard resembles the worship of Jews and Christians. And so we don't pray like that. We don't pray in the graveyard, nor do we pray on the road, nor do we pray in the toilet. You know, unless the toilet's been converted into a prayer space. Road, we understand, because it's going to disturb traffic and disturb the public, unless you have permission, unless it's an exceptional circumstance, and so on. You know, like certain situations as unavailable. But generally, in a road, you don't pray. You don't start praying in the middle of a road. There is no justification. And that would also include, like, for example, passage, pathways, hallways, what that's required for you to be open for health and safety, fire risks, and so on. It will be disliked for you to pray there, and you would be reducing from the reward of your salah. To pray near filth, even. There's filth there, you can smell it, you can stench of it's coming, urine. And be careful when he's praying in service stations as well. And sometimes, generally, we go towards the corner, isn't it? But who else goes towards the corner? The weird people that want to have, there's bathrooms in there, but they still want to, a'udhu billah. So this is to avoid praying near filth. 21, to pray on stolen property, in a stolen garment, or after having made dua from stolen water. I had one of the funniest stories. There was a robbery somewhere in one of the Asian countries, and this robbery took the whole night. Interesting is it was during Ramadan. So it's suhoor time, so the robbers said to the ladies, come on, cook us some suhoor, we're going to fast tomorrow. So they actually forced the women to make them food to have suhoor, so they carried on robbing the house while fasting, having suhoor, as if nothing even happened. Ajib. So, strange, Allah. To pray on stolen property, in stolen garment, or after having made from stolen water. Why would you steal water to make wudu with it? You shouldn't do that. It's Makrooh. 22, to pray while having the urge to urinate or defecate, or while needing to relieve oneself from gas. You're really bursting, you need to go to the toilet. Then go to the toilet, do wudu, and then come back. To pray in that situation, all you're going to be thinking about is the toilet. You're going to be wishing to be in the toilet than in salah. That's not a situation you're going to put yourself in. So go, relieve yourself, do wudu, and then come back and pray. 23, to pray in work clothes. Now it's caveated, as in it's got a condition. 280 says, namely clothes that are usually dirty and worn out, or clothes that that one normally wears in the house and are not suitable attire when meeting distinguished personalities. Praying in such a cloth is deemed mild dislike. If you're going to meet Allah, then you should try to make yourself presentable. If someone only has teared up, ripped clothes, then khalas, it's understandable, that's all they have. But if someone has the option of choosing and changing clothes, but they're not because they're being lazy, then come on, you'd not meet anybody that's distinguished. Imagine standing in front of Allah in such a lazy and unprepared manner. This would be disliked. To pray in a garment on which there is a picture of an animate creature. 281 says, that resembles carrying an idol. And this is where it's very important. That when you wear clothes, don't wear, sometimes you have logos. Make sure it's not of an actual, there's no picture. Sometimes you see someone praying in the mosque and there's a full-on tiger. Oh, you get scared at the back, like stand out from recording it. Tiger's face coming up towards you. Even if you don't get scared, for that person it will be wrong because you're carrying the picture, an actual picture. Shapes are something different. Logos are somewhat different because they don't have the actual eyes and but actual picture of an animate object, and this would be makruh and would reduce the salah. To pray in one, to pray in one garment, okay. To pray with one's head uncovered, without hat or uncovered in any form. It's sunnah to have your head covered. It's sunnah, though some will argue otherwise, but it is actually established. The Prophet ﷺ did wear a imamah, wear a turban, covered his hair with one thing or the other. Yes, unless done out of humility. 282, let's read that. This of course pertains to men alone, since for women, if they were to expose their hair, then we're not talking about makruh. We've got bigger issues to deal with. So, praying with one's head uncovered, you should try to cover it. Unless done out of humility. I don't know, somebody has a hat of some sort, maybe it's a hat of honor or something, I don't know, and they just want to take it off and say, Allah, I'm doing sujood to you only, and they want to expose their forehead. That's a separate issue. To pray when food has been served. This is probably one of our favorite ones, one of the favorite makruhat. To pray when food is served. When food is served, if the asha is present, if the food is dinner's here, then you should eat your dinner and then pray. Or eat your iftar and then pray, because all you'll do otherwise is just get distracted. Of course, unless the time is very dayiq, you're about to go out of time, then you should pray first. But generally, if the food has been served, then you should eat first and then pray. To pray in the presence of a picture of an animate creature. So on the walls, there are pictures of things and etc. You can't pray there. It's makruh. To pray around that which would distract a person. Anything that would distract a person, a TV, a noise, etc. You shouldn't pray there. To pray in a congregation while standing alone in a row. This is, a lot of people don't know that. Some people they don't want to go walk to the corner, they just make their own row over there. You shouldn't pray alone in a row. You should have someone else with you to complete the row. Or you should join another row. Unless, of course, you know that there is someone coming, then you should if you need to make a new row, you need to make a new row if someone comes. Let's read that footnote actually. It says, to pray alone in a row, 285 says, rather, if there is a gap in the row in front of him, he should fit in, or fill it in. Otherwise, if there is no gap, then early jurists maintain that he should gently pull someone from the row. However, due to the widespread ignorance among people regarding the rules of prayer, the later verdict is that one should not pull anyone, but rather stand alone in the row. So it depends on where you are. If you're in a mature masjid where you know that if someone taps your back, they will actually go back, because they're telling you to go back because you need to complete a row. If that level of education is there, then you should try to pull someone. But if you know that you're praying in a masjid where people don't know what's going on, they're like, why are you pulling me in prayer for? And they might just cause another situation. Then you shouldn't pull them. But nonetheless, it is makruh for you to pray in a row alone, intentionally of course. And so you should always pray in a row, fill in a row, join a row, or make a new row. With, of course, another person or more. To pray around that which would distract you. Okay, to pray in front of a furnace or an ember, 286 says, as it resembles the worship of Magians or Magians. How do you pronounce that word? Like fire worshippers, Majus. As opposed to praying in front of a candle or lamp which is not disliked as a result. It would really depend upon a person's intention. If you're praying in front of a fire, then it seems like you're worshipping the fire. And some people worship the fire. But say, for example, you're in a camp somewhere, you're going camping or something, and fire happens to be in front of you, and you're doing it for heat or to see and so on. That would be a different situation. But one shouldn't make a habit of praying towards fire, because that, again, you see that would lead to shirk, and that is a huge, huge problem. If they actually meet shirk, then that's caused the biggest sin. So may Allah protect us all. To pray in front of people sleeping. 287 says, this is not disliked unless the one praying fears that they may cause him to laugh or feel embarrassed, or that he may pray towards one's face. So the footnote is kind of like sort of commenting on that rule, to say that if you're praying in front of someone sleeping in front of you, praying in front of them, then it should be all right, unless you think that they will distract you, they will cause you to laugh, and so on. To wipe dirt or sweat off one's face that does not distract him during the prayer. It goes back to fidgeting. Always start off with fidgeting, which would excessive amount of it would take out prayer, and a small amount of it would actually distract and reduce the value and the reward of the prayer. Are there any questions so far? That's up to 32. That finishes the section of things that are disliked in Salah. Yes.
So is there any specific type of hats that you get more reward for, or is it just general?
No. Anything that covers your head. And turban, of course, the Prophet ﷺ used to wear turban. And the turban, the imamah has got different types. The Prophet ﷺ used to tie it at different types, different ways. And there are different riwayat, regarding that. Some, the ishkal with that, and the problem is that some of the riwayat will have da'af in it, weakness. But as we know from Salah al-Hadith and the rules of Hadith, is that if there are multiple weak narrations, they come together and they can strengthen one another, and so therefore it can establish to be evidence. So, but nonetheless, the Prophet ﷺ did cover his head. And there's actually a small PDF book called The Crown of a Believer that you can download as a PDF on your phone. Just Google it, and it will actually talk about a lot of evidences behind why wearing a hat or covering your hair is important, why it is a sunnah. Ultimately, anything that covers your head is good, and ideally an imamah, which is the turban itself. Yes, Mushraf at the back. Okay, so that you'd have to be careful about. You'd have to cover in a way that. So it depends what kind of turban you're wearing. And turbans, like I said, they come in various. For example, the Azhari hat that I wear. See, the white cloth around it is actually supposed to be a turban. And some ulama have their turban, the tail hanging. It would actually drag, as like a tail, as a turban is supposed to have. So you shouldn't cover your forehead. You should try to raise it slightly so that it doesn't cover your forehead. Any other questions?
So if you're praying Salah and it goes over your ankles, would that break a Salah?
No, this should be from the Makrooh. It would not break your Salah. You would be disliked as you are engaging in a forbidden thing, which is to cover your ankles. That, of course, is if someone done it intentionally and knowingly and neglectfully and so on. Yes. Oh, sorry, let's go to this guy. You haven't asked the question yet.
Let's say you're praying with a pair of pants, and as you keep doing your ruku, the pants keep falling off. And so every time you stand up, you need to, pull it up. So does that count?
Look at this, subhanAllah, it's so amazing. Your question is actually very interesting, because he said, things that are permissible in the prayer. It is recommended for one to place a barrier in front of him when praying. If someone passes in front of him, he may take that dispensation of saying Subhanallah or gesturing. If someone passes in front of a woman praying, she may ward him off, yet without raising her voice. The following things in the ritual prayer are not disliked. Number one, to fasten one's belt around the waist, because that is to protect you from uncovering your awrah. Let me read the rest of them. These things may appear to be disliked, but they actually do not, because they're actually helping you to maintain a bigger thing, which is covering your awrah and so on. To fasten one's belt and around the waist. To strap a person's sword or the like on their belt, as long as its movement is not distracting, because sometimes it is important to keep it and so on, depending on the situation. We're talking about someone that's actually supposed to carry it, so we're not talking about criminals. To pray facing a copy of the Quran, a sword, the back of someone's sitting, even if quietly. So to pray facing towards a copy of the Quran, i.e. the Quran happens to be in front of you and you're praying in that direction, there's no problem with that. There's no problem with that. Unless someone intends to be worshipping a book, a'udhu billah, then that's shirk, of course. A sword, if someone may put their sword in front of it and just park it up there for storage, there's nothing wrong with that. Someone else's back while they're sitting down, there's nothing wrong with that. Someone sitting in front of you praying towards the Qibla and they happen to be sitting in front of you, there's no problem with that. a candle or a lamp that actually serves the purpose of light. When they said previously that you shouldn't pray towards the fire, we're talking about big fires that look like you're worshipping them. To kill a snake or a scorpion, if one fears their harm, with no more than 2 strikes, even with turning away from the Qibla. If you think there's a scorpion or a snake that's about to attack you, then you're allowed to smack it. You're allowed to knock it out, basically, even if it means that you have to turn away. So you might have to, because sometimes you have to do a little.
Why is there a limit? You said only 2.
Because 3 would mean that you're doing excessive movements and can take you outside the salah.
Yeah, but let's say you survive, like you can't.
I think you'll be okay. Depends on the level of danger you're in. But generally, the number 3, it shows kathra, means you've done it too much. And too much movement in salah will take you outside salah. It doesn't mean anything. It means that you have to do the salah again. That's what it means. Because now you're not praying, you're fighting an animal. so that's why you should just restart your salah. But it should be okay. I mean, it is. You'll find some ikhtilaf there, hopefully. Hopefully you don't have to face a situation where you're facing a scorpion or the likes while praying. Does that extend to spiders? This depends on what kind of spider it is. If it's an actual poisonous spider. It is acceptable for one to pray on carpets or rugs. It's jaiz for you to pray on carpets and rugs. Just so that we're extra clear on that issue. Okay, so therefore, fastening your waist, if you need to, is fine. You should do so. Because otherwise you'll uncover your awrah. Yes, brother. Did you want to ask a question? No. Okay, I thought you were raising your hand, sorry. Khalas, that's fine. In that case, what we'll do, let me just, you got to check on the YouTube people as well. Sometimes they have some very interesting questions.
Actually, I have another question. So,
Yes.
let's say there is a masjid with a door facing, like on the, it's just right there on the sidewalk,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so let's say it's Jummah,
Yeah.
or Salah, whatever, and it gets filled up. Should you pray on the sidewalk or just wait?
It really depends on, is it Jum'ah you're saying, yeah?
Let's say it's Jummah, yeah.
So, this is a fatwa that's a commonly asked question. If there is Jum'ah, one of those salats which are not repeated, what should you do? Should you overflow into the street? It depends on the level of the street. If you know that you are going to block highway, which is very important, it's a very important route and you're going to stop people's huge disruption and so on, then you shouldn't block the path. But if it's a pavement where there is an alternative pavement, you can cross over across the other side. It will be a small inconvenience, but it wouldn't completely destroy a person's day, then that will be a different issue. So it depends on the situation, which prayer and where as well. If it's a normal daily salah, then you know that you can pray. But Jum'ah, of course, if you miss it, then you miss the Jum'ah, you have to pray Dhuhr, or Janazah, or Eid, and so on. Yes?
So I believe you mentioned about dragging someone from the front to create a rope, but would that not create a hole in the rope?
So the front row would basically fill up. This is something that's very important. You know, if someone happens to step away from the saf, this is something a lot of people don't know this, and I'm trying to educate people here as well about this. If there is a gap in your row, you must fill it up. You must move towards the center of the line and fill up the gap. Even if it's a massive gap, you must take a step and fill it up. Does that make sense? So, and when we're talking about dragging someone from the front row, they would drag them from the side, not from the middle. They would drag them from the side of the saf, the end of the saf. And even if they drag them from the middle, which is not the recommended situation, especially if in a masjid they're not aware of the rules and regulations, then those who are in the saf should come to the center and fill up that gap. So in summary, brothers and sisters, whenever you pray in a jama'ah, you must fill up the gap. It's an extremely important sunnah to fill up the gaps. Fill up the gaps. Move towards the left, move towards the right, wherever you need to move towards, fill up the gap. The saf begins where the imam is standing, so move towards the center of the line. Any other questions? Yes, Mushraf.
So you retain the mic to take from the side.
Yes.
Then you start the row from the side.
No.
So driving the middle.
Yeah, or if you have to, like, it depends on the situation, but if you're going to drag someone from the, I would say in Darul Ummah, guys, in Darul Ummah, it's a busy mosque, there's always people coming in, don't drag anybody. Not yet anyway, I'll tell you when to drag them, when they're ready. No, for now, don't drag anybody, otherwise some of the elders, subhanAllah, they'll get very angry at you. And they have sticks, walking sticks, I mean. So, you'll be putting yourself in danger.
So let's say there's two people, there's two guys, and there's a lot of space between them. Can you just divide them and?
Yeah, you should. You should do that. You should fill up the gap. You must fill up the gap.
There's a lot of space, but some people they stand like this with their wide feet open. Like this.
Yeah, this is okay. This is fine because sometimes it is also from the sunnah to join the feet and to join the shoulders. But if you know that there is a gap for someone to fit in, you're supposed to fill up the gaps. Okay, so this is also supposed to fill up the gaps and make sure there are no gaps whatsoever.
So when filling up rows, is it better to start from the right or the left?
The right first and then the left. Center, towards the right and then towards the left. Any other questions? طيب, Jazakumullah khairan. What we have left now is, so we've today covered what are things that are disliked in Salah, and we've also quickly read through things that are permissible in the prayer. I'll just read it again in case you missed it. It is recommended for one to place a barrier, a sutra, in front of you when you're praying. 289 explains. That is, the imam or the person praying alone. As for the followers in a congregation, then the barrier in front of the imam suffices them. The minimum size of a sufficient barrier is an object of a forearm's length and a finger's width. Meaning it could be a small stick, this long, and if it's a thin stick, then this should suffice as a sutra. It is placed upright in front of the one praying alone or in front of the imam. Ideally, 1.5 meters ahead of the imam and aligned with one of his eyebrows, preferably right. If not possible, one may lay it down instead, or spread a garment, or even draw a line in the ground lengthwise towards the qibla. It is mildly disliked to not use a barrier if one is praying in a place where he suspects people might pass in front of them. So basically, sutra is very important. If you think people are going to pass in front of you, you must put something, or you should try your best to put something in front of you. And so in the masjid, I don't know how some people, sometimes they don't understand, or maybe they don't know, they will stand right at the edge of the masjid and block the pathway. And there's like literally space in front of them. They block the pathway. They should not do that. And if they did, they must put a sutra, some sort of a cover, a chair, a bag, a Quran stand, whatever, something to block their way. So the things that are not disliked is to fasten one's belt around the waist, because that's actually preventing them from exposing the aura. And we said that though it may Alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, to pray towards Qibla, if it happens to be a Quran in front of you, or you're praying towards the back of another person, or so on, any other bags or stationery you may be carrying, if you put it in front of you and you're praying towards it, as just because it's there, no one intends any worship from that, as in towards that, then there's no harm in that. And we also said to prevent yourself and protect yourself from harm, like having to ward off a scorpion or a snake or any other animal for your safety, would not distract or would not disturb your salah, would not be makruh during salah. Okay, we have a few other small bits, inshallah, which will hopefully be idhnillah azza wa jal, if Allah permits, we'll be doing next lesson, which is breaking of the prayer. How do you exit the prayer? What happens if you have to abandon the prayer? Are you allowed to pray on a riding animal? And thereby, are you allowed to pray on a plane, on a ship, on a car, on a horse, on a camel, and so on? The prayer of the traveler is a very interesting mas'ala. What a prayer does, when they do qasr, when they don't, to what extent, to what length, how many salawat, how many days, are they allowed to travel, join? These are all very interesting masail. Prayer of the sick. Inshallah, there are interesting chapters coming. For today, we will suffice with this amount, which is things that are disliked in salah, and makruh, and previously we covered the haram things in salah, or things that invalidate your salah. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you for joining. Subhanakallahumma ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Don't forget, tomorrow is our hadith class. Very, very important class. Please do try to attend in person or at least tune in online. May Allah accept from all of us. Taqabbalallahu minna wa minkum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.